Hello and welcome to everyone who are present today in person. And I think we have over 100 people watching online right now already. So big welcome to all of you as well. And yes, it's a good evening. And we have our special speaker today. He's Australian but based in Brazil. And he coordinates the Brahma Kumari's activity in Latin America. And he's come all the way to meet us today and share his wisdom with us. And I have known Brother Ken for around 30 years now. As a child, I knew you. And I'm meeting you after a long time here. But I've grown up with his wisdom. And I know how powerful, simple, yet very powerful sharing can give us a lot of insights in our day-to-day life. But little bit brief bio, I need a paper because it's very exclusively important for me to share here. So Ken has worked he's a renowned consultant and trainer who has collaborated with major global companies across 5 continents, including Akzo-Nobel, Fiat, and General Motors. He is recognized for his expertise in advanced quality management and ethics in workplace, often speaking at international congresses on various topics. He's also a successful creator of self-management and quality of life programs, which have been implemented in more than 29 countries across the world. Also, he is the co-founder of Oxford Leadership Global Consultancy. He speaks multiple languages, yet very humble, down to earth, and very motivating. So I would not take much time, and I would request Ken to come on stage and share his wisdom with us today evening. Thank you. Over to you, brother.
Mike? Oh yeah, I've got a mic here. Right. I was waiting for the mic to show up. Good evening, everyone. I think everyone was just quietly meditating here. I don't know if the people online were also meditating. But let's take another minute out of silence just to free our minds of today and tomorrow. This topic is quite intriguing, that there's my truth, your truth, and the truth. I remember I was driving back to one of our centers in Brazil, and I asked one of the guys that lived in the center, how many centers are there? He said, what do you mean? There's only one. But you live with another 3 people. How many centers are there? He couldn't understand the question. Then I said, well, there's that place in your mind and that place in everyone else's mind, so that's another 3, making 4. You see it one way, each of those other 3 sees it their own way, and there's the real place that no one sees. So there are actually 5 centers. So if you live at home with 6 people, there are actually 7 houses. The one that is in each mind is slightly different. I remember, for example, some of you from India. A friend of mine was looking for actually she was a student, I was teaching English at the time, and she wanted to go for a special holiday. So I said, go to India. I've been to India so many times. I said, go to this place, this place, this place. You'll have a fantastic time. If you like, I'll give you some contacts. She arrived in India finally. She decided to take my advice. And it was the day, she arrived there on the day that Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated. And she was in Delhi. And so there was a shutdown of everything during this, confusion that was there. So she couldn't leave the hotel. And so 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4, 5 days, she got fed up. And when they allowed her to leave, she decided that I'm not going to stay in this place. It's too complicated. And she came back to Brazil. Imagine. So when I saw her, I didn't know about this. I said, how was your trip to India? And she looked at me, don't talk to me about India. It's a terrible place. You see, it's according to the experience that you have, isn't it? How you see something and how someone else sees the same thing, it depends. It won't be the same. If you go to a place for a picnic and it rains the whole day and somebody asks you, how is that place? That's terrible, it rains. And then the other one goes there a week later and the sun is shining. Oh, it's a fantastic place. So it leads us to suspect that the places that we have in our minds, and even the people, they are peculiar to us. We don't have an objective view of practically anything, even ourselves. And so one of the things that I like to do, in fact, it's absolutely essential, if you want to understand something as it really is, that's what the topic is about, then you have to try to be as objective as possible. And you have to see a bit more of the past and a bit more of the future. You have to open up your perception and see the whole, what could it be? What is happening? Where did that come from? Where is it going to go? What are the consequences? And so you start to have a wider view of the same thing. But even that will be colored by your own perception, right? I had many years ago, I suppose, it must have been about 20 years ago, I received an invitation from a Finnish company that had a big manufacturing plant in Brazil. They were the biggest maker of ships engines in the world. It was a Finnish company. They made those engines for the huge super tankers and for oil platforms and so on, generators, those huge engines. And apparently the waiting list for their products was about 8 years. So if you got an 8-year waiting list for your products, you'll probably be able to get through most economic crises. 8 years, everything tends to get sorted out. But the woman asked me, could you conduct a course on leadership and self-deception? I thought, what a strange request, can you do a course or do a training for us on leadership and self-deception? I said, what do you mean by self-deception? And she described it, and actually she sent me a video of a story from the 19th century about the fellow who invented hand washing as a way of putting hygiene into hospitals. An incredible story, actually. But self-deception, I was reading up about it, and apparently we are absolute champions as human beings. We are champions in this subject of self-deception, which means to fool ourselves about things. And there are studies that show that 80% of drivers think that they are better than average drivers, which is statistically impossible. You can't have 80% better than average. So 80% of doctors think that they are better than average doctors. 80% of anything think that they are better than average anything. So it means that of those 80%, some are not so good drivers or not so good doctors or not so good anything. So it's we have an idea of how we are, but the reality tells us something else. And this story, which is quite interesting, was about a Hungarian doctor called Ignaz Semmelweis. And he was in the maternity hospital of Vienna General Maternity Hospital. He was the director of the hospital. And this was before Louis Pasteur. So they did not know that microbes and bacteria existed. They had no idea that illness was caused. And because Pasteur only came around 1865, it was quite relatively recent. They thought that illness was caused by vapors in the air or, something in the room, or they, instead of opening the windows, they closed the windows. They thought the illnesses come from outside. And until then, probably they used leeches to suck the blood out of people. They had no idea what causes some of the nasty illnesses. Anyway, what it was that in that hospital, there were two sections that delivered babies. One section was the midwives, the women who had that function of delivering babies. And the other one was the doctors who delivered the babies. And they were all men, yeah? So in those days, all male doctors practically. And what happened was that the mortality rate in the wing that the doctors delivered babies was about 3 or 4 times higher than the wing in which the midwives delivered the babies. And they didn't imagine why that was happening. So they would perform autopsies on these women, yeah? They would perform autopsies on these women, and then they'd go and deliver the babies without washing their hands. So the women would have died from some infection. The infection's on their hands. With that infection on their hands, they'd go and deliver babies, and more women would die. And they couldn't understand what was happening. And so finally, in the film, and they made a film about this, and this is the father of hand washing. You know, in the pandemic, everyone was washing hands and so on. So this guy was the father or who introduced hand washing as a means of hygiene. But at that time, they had no idea. So in the film, probably it was made up, but they show him coming home, and his wife knows that he's been performing autopsies during the whole day and delivering babies, and he goes to hug his wife, and she sort of, I don't want to touch your hand sort of thing. And he looks at his hand, and then he has a brainwave that maybe what's causing this mortality rate is something on our hands. And they still didn't know what bacteria was, but he decided to tell all the doctors in the hospital that from now on we're going to wash our hands in a lime solution, and then we'll do whatever work we have to do in the hospital. And in between, the autopsies, and in between delivering babies, we will wash our hands in this solution of lime. And the mortality rate went down. Then when he decided to tell his superiors, look, I've discovered that the whole cause of the mortality rate were we doctors and our dirty hands, still not knowing about bacteria. And he got thrown out of the hospital. The doctors would not accept that they were to blame. And he died a pauper, and he was ostracized by his whole profession and so on, all because he dared to question the cleanliness of the doctors. So it's an example of how easily it is for you to believe something about yourself, or in this case, a whole profession, that was completely wrong. So what you are and what is real are not the same thing. So anyway, I said, I told this woman, I'll take it on. He said that because of this very favorable economic situation, our people have become very complacent. They have terrible relationship with each other. But economically, we're doing fine. But the relationship, the work atmosphere is absolutely terrible. Can you come and help? So I thought, how can I teach self-deception how can I talk about self-deception without showing them how it actually works? So I figured out a way that I would show them. And this was in the days when people used emails quite a lot. And so I said to them, how many people are involved? She said about 10. The top people in this company, they had their main manufacturing plant in a duty-free port in Brazil, in Manaus, which is in the middle of the jungle, in the middle of the Amazon. So what I did was I devised, and this is something quite useful if you can think about it, I made a list of about 50 adjectives which describe human behavior. And I told them, can you make 2 lists for everyone, all of yourself and all of the members of the team, all of those other 9. So there are 10 of them. If each one does themselves and the other 9, you have to evaluate yourself and everyone else. Write down which of these 5 things you have naturally, you show naturally as like a natural virtue. They were all virtues, actually. And which of those 5 adjectives you feel that you need to develop. And do the same with all of the other 9. So, and then compare. Compare your list, how you evaluated yourself, and then you will receive also 9 evaluations of you from your colleagues. And everyone had their own, and that the evaluation done by everyone else of themselves. So this idea of what you think and what I think and what is real, you can start to sort of work it out, how it looks. And I told them, and it's a pretty basic thing, I told them that the things that are on your list, the virtues that you have naturally and the ones you need to develop, if they are also on everyone else's list, then that's something that you are, that's real. That is something you are actually showing. The things that are on your list are not on anyone else's list. They're the things that you are not revealing, not showing. The things that are on everyone else's list are not on your list. That's what you're blind about. They are your blind spots. So what you see and everyone else's see, that's okay. That's pretty correct. What you see but no one else's sees, you're probably hiding it. And what everyone else sees but you don't see yourself, that's what you're blind about. And it was true. And so the whole thing that I did with them, I started off with that. And they were saying, I had no idea that you thought that about me. I couldn't imagine that all of you people think that I'm, I need to be more humble. I need to be more patient. I think I'm already patient enough. But I thought I was really a very determined person, but it didn't turn up on anyone else's list, my determination. So, you see how it is? Everyone will see the same thing differently. So just think about it. The implications are quite astounding. How many people inhabit your head? Huh? What's the population of your head? How many people do you keep in mind, in other words? How many people do you have in your mind? You've got a couple of people. Family members at least. What about work? Quite a few. The thing is, what about you? How many people?
Maybe 100, I don't know.
100? Oh my God.
It depends what the kind of question, I guess. People I try to be taking care of.
The people that you mainly think about.
Yeah, about 100 maybe. Yes.
About 100 people. Oh, yeah. Yeah, what about you? 10. Okay. Yeah? Now, imagine those people, and let's say in your mind there's like a gallery of people. You can remember their faces, yeah? So imagine like a gallery. And what's your opinion of that person? This person, that person, this person. So generally you have the person, then underneath there's a caption. This one's a little bit difficult. You've got to be careful with him because, I've had some hard times with that person. This one here is a little bit irresponsible. This one here is funny, So we put under each person some adjectives also. He's like this, he's like this, he's like this. The thing is that's your vision, right? Is that true? Let's say the only time, how many times does someone have to do something to create an impression in your mind? Huh? But sometimes only once, right? Is that enough? Like the guy had his worst day of the whole year. I mean, that was the day that you crossed paths with him. And then, he didn't treat you very well because he was having a hard time. So the only time you met him in the last 6 months, you had a hard time. And then you meet him 6 months later and he also has a bad day, but they're the only 2 bad days he's had in the whole year, and you meet with him and he gives you a hard time. So in your mind, you already classify, right? That fellow is like this and like this. And this one is like this and like this. And this one is like this and like this. Actually, no one is what you think they are. They don't even know themselves. If you ask them, how will you describe yourself? They will have difficulty. So there I am saying, this fellow is like this and like this and like this. And I tell others, I influence others, and it's really not fair. There's something called the Pygmalion effect. It's based on that play by George Bernard Shaw called Pygmalion. Very famous playwright. He was Irish, actually, but in the English language, probably one of the most famous playwrights of the 20th century. And he wrote this play called Pygmalion, on the basis of which that musical called My Fair Lady was made. Now, Pygmalion was this figure from Greek mythology. He was a prince, and he was a sculptor. And once he made a statue of a very beautiful woman called Galatea, and he fell in love with the statue. It was so beautiful that he fell in love with the statue. And he just, the gods felt so sorry for Pygmalion, they made Galatea alive, and they got married and lived happily ever after, sort of thing. Myth, right? But Pygmalion is like, if you believe something, it comes true. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you believe and believe and believe and believe, and you can make something actually seem to come true. Now, there are numerous experiments that are done with this idea, especially in the field of education. And let's say it like this. I've got two groups of students here, right? This is a group of really bad students, this side. Yeah, you people are really bad students, right? And these ones here are really good students. Now, they've done this experiment so many times that it actually became unethical to continue. So a new teacher comes to the school, and I'm the director. And what they did was the director of the school told the new teacher coming in, look, these students who are the bad ones are actually the best ones. You're really going to have a good time with these people. They're really good students, but actually they were the worst ones. And told another teacher about you people are the good students, but actually you're going to really have a hard time with these students. They're really bad. You're going to really have a bad time. You know what happened? In 99 cases out of 100, the ones that were the good students, really the good students, they became worse. And the ones that were the bad students actually became better. Just because of the influence. If you tell someone, be careful of this one, even before they're coming, right? And you're saying, look, you have to know this. Be careful this one is coming, because you're going to have a hard time or you're going to have a good time. They end up having a good time or a bad time because of the influence of the opinion. So this is called the Pygmalion effect. You believe something and it happens. So the good students get worse, the bad students get better. But what's real? What's the real? So every person that we have in our heads, there is what I think, there is what they think, and there is a third one which is real. This is what they really are. So I think we should learn to be more generous with people, because especially if we're in a position of leadership, we can influence negatively so many people. Or we can, not necessarily negatively, but wrongly. My word counts. My opinion counts. Be careful. So otherwise the person was going in with his own good wishes or whatever, and suddenly along the way I tell him, be careful. You change the way that they will approach this person. It's a very subtle thing. And what is really real, we have to develop a vision to see things. once I had to give a talk to kids about 14 or 15 years old. It's not necessarily the sort of public that I generally get in touch with, right? Anyway, they took me to this school where the students were really behaving badly. I'm like, well, I'm going to give a talk to these kids. You know, they sit down and talk, and they're all fighting with each other and throwing paper at each other and shouting and just misbehaving generally. And what am I going to say to them? So I had an idea that I would do a play with them. So, and what it was is to illustrate more or less what we're talking about tonight. That there is the opinion of each one, but there is also the reality, which actually no one sees the whole picture generally. So I invented for them to do a play. And I wanted them to do it. Like I wanted 5 volunteers from amongst these kids. I asked them, are there any of you that are good actors? And they pushed a few kids forward. Yes, these ones. So I went outside with them. Meanwhile, they continued throwing paper and shouting and generally misbehaving. And I went out into the corridor and explained, look, we're going to do a play. You have to do it in a very colourful and exaggerated way, because we know that when there's colour and exaggeration, people remember better. So I want one of you to be a victim of a car accident. Someone who goes to a party, gets drunk, gets in his car and driving home, smashes into a tree and gets killed. So one of you are going to be the dead person. And they say, okay, sure. And one of you is going to be a policeman. It's in a small town. So the policeman is sort of a bit sleepy. He's sort of waiting for his shift to finish. And he wants to go home. So he's not going to be very happy that you have an accident just as he's going off his shift, because that will mean another 2 hours work for him. So one of you are going to be a very unhappy policeman, okay? One of you is going to be a doctor. It's in a small town, so it's like just a health post, a health outpost in a small town, and probably sleeping just in this place, waiting for anything to happen in that sort of, in the village. And also you're going to be sleepy. So one of you is going to be a sleepy doctor. The other one's going to be a hysterical mother. The mother finds out that her son has been killed and she goes into hysterics. So one of you is going to be a hysterical mother. And then the last one's going to be a tow truck driver. So you've been waiting for an accident to happen. It's the first accident in 2 weeks, and you've got 6 kids to feed, and it's the only income that you get. So you're going to be extremely happy that there's been a car crash, because this is a chance for you to get money, right? So a mercenary tow truck driver, a sleepy doctor, an angry policeman, a hysterical mother, and a dead victim. That was the play. And you have to do it in like slapstick, very funny. You really exaggerate and shout, and of course it was just built for kids of that age. They really liked it. They really got into it, and of course immediately everyone was paying attention because they were their colleagues, right? We'd put a challenge before them. Instead of giving a talk, they were doing a play. And then, well, exactly that happened. The guy dies spectacularly. The policeman turns up, and for him it's just a stupid, inconsiderate person who decided to die on his shift when he was going to go off. And then he calls the doctor, they're friends, and the doctor says, yeah, what's up? He says, oh, you got to come over here near this intersection because there's a young person dead, died in an accident. You've got to come here and fill out the paperwork. Okay. And while they're looking over his papers, they find out that he's the son of a widow who, she's famous for being hysterical. And it's her only son and a sort of source of support and so on. So when she finds out, she decides to come to the scene of the accident and starts to scream and cry and tear her hair out and jump up and down. And of course, then the tow truck driver arrives in the middle, and he starts to argue with everyone. Who's going to pay? I've got to take this car away. Who's going to pay? And they said, can't you see this woman just lost her son? You don't be so nasty, wait for a bit. Anyway, everyone starts to argue with everyone else and then play finishes in the middle of the argument. And then I asked them, okay, which of those 5 people had the correct view of the situation? Which one?
Everyone.
None and everyone. Yeah? Some of them said the dead person. So I use that as an opportunity. Okay, when you die, what happens? The soul leaves the body. What happens when what's the soul? What's the body? So it was a chance to talk about soul and body. And he's sort of floating out of the body and looking down and seeing the whole scene. Probably has a better vision of the whole thing than anyone else. But you see, everyone goes into that situation sort of pushed along a tunnel of their own perception, right? Policeman sees things as policemen do. How many accidents has he attended? How many dead bodies has he seen on the side of the road? It's just one more. So just another statistic, right? Now, the doctor, he's seen so many cadavers, even in his anatomy classes, he's cut up dead bodies. For him, it's just a piece of meat, right? Just a slab of meat. But for the mother, it's her loving son, it's her support. She's crying more for herself than for him, actually, because she's lost her means of support. And the tow truck driver, can you blame him for wanting to earn some money? And someone has to do the work of towing wrecked cars away out of the highway. So each of them is seeing the situation in a tunnel of their own perception. They're seeing things like that. You can't blame them for that. That's been their experience and this is their perception now. So every time you're sitting, it's not just you and one other person. It's the same, right? You and one other person are talking about something. You will see it your way. They will see it their way. But the reality is sort of a mixture of both plus other factors. If there were a 6th person in that scene and was watching from a distance everything and could see the past of each of those people and you could see the consequences of what they do, you would probably have an approximate idea of what really is going on. But who does that? If you're in a meeting discussing something, do you remember that that person comes from another, there are so many examples of this. Do you think that in, let's say, in the Palestinian schools, what they teach the children about the problem with Israel is the same as what they teach the children in the Israeli schools? Is it the same? Do the Pakistanis teach the same about the partition of India and Pakistan as they do in the Indian schools? Probably not. I was in Japan. I asked them, "Do you know why? All of the people around Japan hate the Japanese? Because during the Second World War they were terrible. They murdered more than 11 million people, and they made sex slaves out of Korean women and Chinese women and so on. So that is stuck in the history." And I asked them, "Did you learn that in your schools, in the Japanese?" And they said, "What are you talking about?" So I remember I was in Vietnam and in Hanoi. I went there for some Lockheed work, and when I was 18, the Vietnam War was still being fought. And kids of 18, my age, were being conscripted and sent to Vietnam to fight in a war, 18 years old. And so we were very violently against the war. The student activists at the time, I was in that sort of finish the war sort of thing. I didn't get called up because I had broken my thigh. So one leg was shorter than the other. So I was useless for the army, which was okay because I know people who were killed. But then what we were told about the Vietnam War was one argument. The government at the time was a great supporter of the Americans, and it was a completely unjust war, as it turns out. Then, when I was in Hanoi, we went to the War Museum there, and there was an old Vietnamese general who fought in the war, sort of a wise person, and he was explaining. First time in my life I heard their story about the Vietnam War. So what we were told in Australia to justify sending troops and what this guy was telling were completely different stories of the same thing. So who is right? Who is right in a war? Which one? Which one is right in the war? It's hard to justify war. Anyway, in any way, shape or form. So, in essence, what I wanted to say is that what we think about anything may not be real. And that's a bit scary. What we entertain in our own minds about anything could be just a product of our own subjective life experience. Like this friend of mine, if you ask her about India until today, she thinks India's a terrible place. I mean, I went there, I spent 6 days in a hotel, I couldn't go out in the street, and as soon as they opened out, it was so confusing, I left running. But then I tried to convince, but India is so much more than that, so beautiful, so many nice things you could see. No way. She's fixed with that idea. So how many of our beliefs are actually true? That's a bit scary. How many of our beliefs are real? How many of the people that we think exist as we believe actually exist like that? It's my opinion that it's not real. Partially real, maybe. It has some sort of evidence pointing to that. But who's the final judge? Huh? God. That's why everyone says God knows. God knows. Yeah. We appeal to his wisdom, I suppose. Now, if he was looking at you, what would he say to you? I mean, this is where it gets more scary. So what I believe about myself and what is really real may not be the same thing. I'm probably much better than I think I am. If I could see my whole history, all of my births, then I would understand a lot more about why I am the way I am. But because I don't have access to that information, I have an idea. But how real is that idea? Generally, we think we're better or worse than we really are. And generally, we think people are better or worse than they really are. And generally, we think situations are better or worse than they really are. So it's really useful to stop. And if you go into a deeper state of meditation, this is what I was thinking about this morning. There are different levels. There's a surface level of things, and it's sort of up and down, not very stable. Our opinion, if we just live on the surface of things, one day my opinion is great, next day my opinion is not great. One day my opinion is favorable, next day my opinion is not favorable about the same thing. So I'm sort of fluctuating, being influenced by many things and many. This is another thing that we have to consider. How many influences are there in my perception? Yeah?
I have a question.
I'll just finish off then, and then there's a section for questions. Just to finish off this idea, then we can open up for questions. So, in meditation, we go a little bit deeper than that. We start to get a grasp of other factors, right? There's if let's say, for example, someone criticized me quite severely in public, and what they say is not true, in my opinion. What they say about me is not true. It's not exactly that. I can understand how they may have got to that conclusion, but it wasn't exactly that, and I didn't have a chance to explain myself. So that person is not exactly objective. Maybe they're jealous. How much does jealousy affect our opinion about someone? How much does my anger affect my opinion about someone? How much does my ego affect my opinion? It could be the same person. Jealousy says one thing, ego says something else, anger says something else, attachment says something else. So if I remove all of the vices, how is my description? It'll be different, right? If there's no anger, there's no jealousy, there's no ego, my opinion may be closer to the truth. And well, in meditation, basically, it's a chance to go beyond the game. Go beyond the sort of relationship even. And you can see the relationship as if you were a third person. And it's very healthy to do that. If you can go beyond your own story and you can see other people's stories, it's very healthy to be able to do that. But it requires to go a little bit deeper.
Outside the box.
Pardon?
Outside the box.
You have to go outside the box. You know, you have to, instead of being the drunk person or the doctor, the policeman, the tow truck driver, or the mother. You are beyond all of that. You're looking at the whole thing. You're looking at the whole play of going on, and you can get a better opinion than what your personal involvement would tell you. So there's a lot of argument to say that a lot of our thinking, just because of what I shared, a lot of our thinking is actually wrong. What I think and what others think about the same thing, what is really real and what I think and what someone else thinks may not be the same thing. So just imagine a lot of our useless thinking is just us talking to ourselves wrongly about things and people. What I believe and what is real may not be the same. And if in meditation, this is where meditation really helps. Because for us, yoga means connecting not only with the self, but connecting with the Supreme, right? That's the one who's above everything, and that's the one who can actually see things better. So if I have that connection, I can see things better. I can be more truly objective rather than just being influenced by my own vices. I can see things much better. And that's meditation can help us get there. So if you've got some questions, I guess it's now the time to ask a few, then we see where we go. Yeah? She's got a question.
Just before we begin the question-answer session, announcements for all our online viewers. We've got more than 200 people watching right now. So
where's the camera?
Just right.
Oh, yeah. Hi. Hi, everyone.
So if you have any questions, you can, there are 100 people on webcast and website. If you can log on to Inner Space Wembley YouTube channel and use the live chat box to ask your questions, then we can ask Ken here. And those who are already on Facebook.
What's the name of the channel?
Inner Space Wembley.
Oh, Inner Space Wembley. Okay.
You can either go on Facebook or YouTube and use a live chat, and then we could ask Brother Ken.
Okay.
So, had a question?
She has the question. We got a bit of competition here from the underground station.
Thank you. I understand the part where... Is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay. I understand the part where there always, or in most cases, there are two sides to every story, and we are often blindsided by our opinions and by our experience, as a lot of people say. But how would... I understand the war example and how hard it is to point at one country and say, like, you started it, or it's on you, or things like that. But, like, for example, do you believe there are also things that we can be looked at as black and white? Like, for example, a rape victim, what would be the other side to the story? How are we not able to point blank say, you were wrong? It's just something that crossed my mind.
I think, some things are morally incorrect, no matter how you look at it. You'll have a difference of maybe some degrees of how wrong it really is, but there are some things you can't justify. Like if somebody murders somebody, they murder somebody, and so the society will hold him responsible for that, especially if it's proven beyond any reasonable doubt that happened. Now, what I'm talking about is more about the opinion that we have of people's personalities. You know, things are morally wrong. They will always be morally wrong in most countries. If you don't respect an older person, it's the same in Afghanistan as it is in the United States of America. You know, if a taxi driver gets angry in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and starts to shout, he will probably, and you translate what he's shouting, it's probably the same thing that a taxi driver in Buenos Aires is saying, just a different language. So there will be cultural differences. There will be different sort of languages, but human beings we have much more in common than we have as a difference. That's part of being able to see things truly, actually. Because if I can see what I have in common with the person I'm thinking about, it will probably help me to modify my beliefs. Because if I'm upset with someone, for example, I have an opinion and definitely that person did something bad and I'm feeling upset about it and how dare they do that. But if I calm down a bit and see that behind all of that, the person was probably just wanting attention or wanting love, and I was also wanting love. So if I can see what I want and what the other one really wants, then there can be some common territory which would help to heal the relationship. We have much more in common with everyone than we have differently. We have different personalities. Some are more aggressive, some are more introspective, some are more silent, some are more loud, like that. At a personality level. But if you go down deeper, we are all souls. We are all children of God. We are all, and that person that I don't think particularly well about, I'm a peaceful soul, and that one is also a peaceful soul in essence. So why am I making such a big deal about some personality or some aberration in their behavior? Why am I making such a big deal out of it? So this is where soul consciousness helps us. Any other questions? Any other comments? What about online?
So you spoke about the influences on mind. The question is, how do you keep yourself protected by the external influences? And you also talked about having a vision, to develop a vision which can see the real truth. What's the process to develop? How do we cultivate that vision?
I guess the same. I mean, both in a way, the answer is the same. If through meditation practice, I do develop a certain resilience, a certain strength that sort of makes me more less susceptible to influences from outside. So if I'm very, very weak, I will also be very, very shaky. I will also be very easily influenced. But as I become stronger internally through meditation, I become more resistant to influences. And at the same time, as I meditate more, especially on the idea that I'm a soul, everyone else is a soul, and we are all children of the same Supreme Father. We have qualities in common. And as I develop that feeling in myself, I start to develop that vision for others too. So my vision does open up, and I can see behind the color of the skin. I can see behind the age of the person. I can see behind even the culture that the person has, or even the tradition that the people have. There are so many things that we have in common at a deeper level, but because we're so influenced by appearances and even by language. I always believe that if we all spoke the same language, we would definitely have less problems than we do. I'll give you one example. The word in Aramaic, which was the language of Jesus, he didn't speak Hebrew. Hebrew was the language of the priests. right? He spoke Aramaic, which was the local language, the local dialect. And you know the word God in Aramaic, what it is? Allah. So if ever Jesus said the word God, he would have used the word Allah, which means the one, the one, the only one. So I'm sure that if the Christian, if the Christians and the Muslims and the Jews, actually it's the same word as Eloah or Elohim, which is the word that the Jews use. It's the same word. And they're using the same words to talk about the same God, but they don't think that it's the same. They don't realize it's the same. If we knew that it was the same, why would there be such a confusion? You know? God doesn't support any war against anyone, for sure. You know, so on whose side is he? He's on the Christian side, or the Muslim side, or the Hindu side, or the Jews side, or the Palestinian side? No side. Those problems are just human beings at a very superficial level, based on tradition, maybe based on historical perspective, settling their karmic accounts, you could say. So there's a bigger story happening than our little things that happen between us. If I can see the bigger story, I can understand many more things. And that helps my vision. Yeah? What else? Anything else?
May I say something?
Yeah.
It's really not a question, and I don't want to open up a new box, but just in relation to the lady who asked the first question, the law of karma explains a lot of that. And something that at least I always tell myself, is that nothing can happen to me that it's not in my karma. So even the most horrible thing that happens to anyone, there was a cause, and it was in the karma of that person. But that's another lecture, and I think that you don't want
it is connected,
to
right?
go into it.
Because I may be lost in my own belief, and the other person may be lost in their own belief, and neither of us are seeing the karmic cause of that, which is the real cause of the problem in the first place.
Just a quick one. Mine, yours, and the truth, right? So the question I have is, we spend a lot of time at work, 40 hours a week minimum.
Can you speak up louder?
Yeah, we spend like good 40 hours of conscious time at work, and over a period of time, when you have a sample size or a data which proves a person behaves in a certain way,
Yeah.
co-workers or stakeholders, whatever you call it, is it not fair? It's not about judging. Is it not fair to develop the triggers which annoy the person, the things which make the person happy? Or you think that's, again, my story, not the real, or close to the real, if the sample size is sort of a bit larger, meaning over a period of months, not just days or one meeting?
Is it not fair to what?
It's not fair to have that perception which is close to the reality, that, yeah, this is the person who behaves in a way.
I think also, if 20 people are saying the same thing about someone, it's probably closer to the truth than your own opinion. If you think something and no one else thinks it, then you probably have to adjust. But if everyone thinks the same, if someone who's really a little bit irresponsible and it affects everyone will see it. And everyone will call it for what it is. It is just because it's not really an opinion in that case. It really happened. The person did something that was terribly irresponsible, and it affected the whole team. So we should call it for what it is. But I'm talking more about when you think something and the other one thinks something different, and you started to fight about something which is actually not real. If you're ever arguing with someone, probably neither of you are true, at least during the argument, because you probably had to abandon truth to get angry. Yeah? So, the whole thing is that if you meditate, you'll feel better about yourself. You'll feel better about others. You'll start to see behind their masks, and you'll start to take away your own mask. And then, you start to see a bigger truth behind everything. And it's easier to live with people like that. You are less judgmental. At least you allow people to be what they are for some time. The thing is that we think unnecessarily about what our opinion is or what the opinion of the other. And then you start to think about the opinion of the opinion of the opinion of someone. God, you get some third-hand news, came from one to the other, and finally got to you. By then it's completely different from what really happened anyway. So we shouldn't be so gullible, that's the word, so easily fooled. Gullible means easily fooled. We should be a bit wiser in our transactions with others. Relationships are transactional, right? So it means how I am, how the other is, where I am, what I am, where I'm coming from, where the other's coming. There's a whole lot of stuff. But see the bigger picture and then you'll understand more. As you widen your vision, you'll understand more and you'll see things better and you can decide better. Okay?
Last question. If there is an argument where two people have different views, what is the easiest way to come to an agreement?
If there's an argument, I couldn't get the last bit.
There are two different views, two different stories. What's the easiest way to come to an agreement?
There isn't an easy way. Depends, if there's that story that you need two hands to make a noise, right? If one of the hands stops clapping, the other one keeps just flapping. So then in that silence, maybe you could understand something. One of the persons decides to remain quiet and in peace, it helps a lot. But if you continue arguing in your mind, I will say this, I will say that, I will say the other thing, and the other one also is probably doing that, fighting mentally, then not going to help. But if you're the one who supposedly wiser and you're a meditator, you've got a better chance of resolving it than someone who doesn't know. So let's have some meditation maybe.
40 years plus experience of meditation can help many. If you can have a guided meditation.
Okay. Okay. So just just go into a simpler state of mind. There are two worlds, one outside, one inside. And I'm sitting inside. My attention is on where I'm actually thinking. So just visualize a subtle seat behind the middle of the forehead, which is actually in between the two sides of the brain. The world is happening around us, but also internally I'm just being what I am. I'm just this tiny being of light. Like giving life to this body. If I were not here, the body wouldn't be here, wouldn't be alive even. So I'm the energy, I'm the conscious energy that gives life to this body and life to the personality that I act out through it, the roles that I have. But I am the vital force behind my life. And I see myself as that conscious energy, a point of conscious energy, just shining in the middle of the forehead. It's my existence at a subtle level. And because I'm not rushing around anywhere, I am still, and therefore peaceful. I'm not having any desires at the moment, so I feel content. So just stay in that state. Even the people that you live and work with, just imagine them sitting around you at the moment. And they are also at that deeper level, similar to you. At this deepest level, there's practically no difference. Sure, they have different activities, different personalities, but at this essential level, very similar. I am a peaceful soul, child of God, and each one of them is also. Each one of them is also. So just enjoy. You're surrounded by your spiritual brothers. Sure, each one has his own story, and each one's story is acting out. But at this deep level, we are very similar. Just peaceful, loveful beings of light. So just feel that. Meditation is much more about feeling than thinking. Just feel that this is how I am deeply and how everyone else is also deeply. So just stay in that state for a few more moments. Okay. Come back and here we are.
to our online viewers, and special thank you to Brother Ken. Om Shanti, and have a good evening. Thank you.